We just want to say good morning to our listenership and our viewership. As you may know, we take the Sunday morning sermon and we have a bit of an interview discussion. So I just want to welcome Mark Ellis and Steve Pilbrough here this morning.
Good morning.
Steve Pilbrough shared on the last chapter of Corinthians. We've been working our way through Corinthians over the last couple of weeks and months. So we invite people to come here on a Sunday morning and hear the preached, taught message. And then this interview serves to augment that message by maybe delving into some of the background stuff, some of the underlying, and any questions that people may ask. So coming out of Sunday, if you have a question on your mind, please put it down on paper, get it to the office, get it to Tamlin Ellis or one of the leaders in the church. We'd love to discuss that. So, Sunday morning, my kind of kickoff question is always, what was the takeaway that you anticipated in your preparation and in your delivery? What was that one thing you wanted people to remember when they walked out the door, when they got home on Sunday?
Yes, I found it extremely interesting studying for this last chapter. And as I said on Sunday, thanks very much, Steve. You really made me work hard. But I really enjoyed it because one thing that I did was I read several times the whole book altogether. It was so useful doing that. And often we forget to do that. We take our couple of chapters in the morning that we have in our quiet time, and we can get real good nuggets out of it. But when we look at the whole book, and that's what I found that I wanted people to take away. What was Paul really getting at? And we've heard many times from the different preachers during this period of 1 Corinthians that there was a lot of division, and he was addressing all of those, drilling down to the points that they were dividing amongst themselves. But what I found out about it, he was most concerned that they were not loving one another. And they were being selfish and childish in their process, in the stuff that they did in community. And it was love that I wanted to come out of the summary of the whole book. That if we don't love one another, the world will not know that the Father loves them as he loves us. And that was the main thing I wanted to get out.
Okay, Mark, what would your takeaway have been on Sunday?
Well, I mean, there's what a person gets out of listening, and what I got out of listening was that there was a summary of 1 Corinthians 16, and I mean of 1 Corinthians, the whole book, and it was just this really big summary with a let's be generous kind of thing at the end. That's kind of all I really got out of Sunday.
Okay, it's interesting because we have been systematically working through the book chapter by chapter. So I think if anybody came on Sunday morning wanting to hear chapter 16, they got more of a panoramic view of the whole book and not specifically chapter 16, which wouldn't have affected or offended anyone because there were enough nuggets and pellets in that shotgun approach, which is a panoramic overview of a book. I've heard a number of preachers on a whole book at a time, and from that point of view, nobody could leave you on Sunday and say, I never got something. Maybe it wouldn't have been one single underlying proposition that drove the outline of the teaching, but for most people, they would have heard something that would apply in their situation. I think if someone was coming along, maybe that was my mindset as I was waiting for chapter 16 to be expounded. I might have left going, well, I never heard much about chapter 16 in terms of the systematic chapter by chapter expository, but there was enough in there that I can let that go from a systematic point of view, because there was enough given. And you spoke really well on Sunday morning. Your presentation your cohesion of thoughts. You're very cognitive, very persuasive, and certainly brought a good message. So well done on that.
Thanks, Steve.
Do you want to comment on what I've just said?
Yes, I want to do that because it was very. The other books were the other chapters. They were all hanging around a different subject that he was trying to address within that church. And as I said on Sunday, there was this. Right now, you take up an offering. And then he went on to some greetings, and it was very fragmented. It was very difficult to put something in. Right in the middle was be strong, work in love, and I could have just worked on that. But I felt that God really gave me that generosity at the beginning of chapter 16, talking about why on earth did you put that here? Paul, it was kind of like an add-on, but it was like the Holy Spirit was telling me, this is the culmination and the proof that they have repented. They've taken Paul's words, and Paul will know, and Timothy, who will come and visit them, that they've actually taken him seriously, because they are going to take what he said and be generous in action for the Jerusalem trouble that they're having there. So I felt that it was necessary to go through all of the different pieces and finish it up. And yes, I was a bit rushed at the end, which was unfortunate, to expound that offering idea in it, and I thought that was quite nice to do that. And that was the main thing: love one another and be generous one to another. It was all part of his general theme coming through.
I think my takeaway gem of the teaching would have been exactly what you've said, that his conclusion thought wasn't an out of the context thought. It was very much, okay, I've had to address selfishness, I've had to address self-centeredness, I've had to address egocentrism, I've had to address division. Now, let me talk about your pockets. If you give, you will show that you've overcome some of this self-centered selfishness in life. So my only wish there is, well, hope there, is that point came across. Because I know you started there, and I actually thought, wow, what a great way to hinge all the points on. But then it kind of ran out of, maybe as you say, out of time, out of steam at the end, where that was a bit lost. But I hope for our viewers that's not lost. And for those listening to this, that the main takeaway of chapter 16 is that when you talk about people dipping into their finances, you're addressing the issue of self-centered living. You're addressing the issue of division and of self-living, because you are giving. And I've often heard people say love is spelt giving, because love is expressed not by the things I say, but the time I give, the finance I give, my gifting that I give. So in all of the introduction and the covering of the chapters, it would be sad if you lost that point. And I would say well done again on the teaching, but maybe the takeaway learning is that the hinge needs to be well oiled if it's going to achieve its outcome. Mark, you want to say something?
Yeah, the original word for love in 1 Corinthians 13 is the word charity, which was kind of really iconified by giving. It's if you think about the word charity, we think about giving. We don't think about God kind of love, but yet charity is a word used by the King James writers to represent the kind of, because what's happening is you're giving without expecting anything in return. It's self-sacrificial. And what was interesting about that particular line is that he now directs them to start being what he's telling them that they are. And he says, this is one step you can take in that direction. And it's a physical step that they can take that's actually going to help people see the that they actually have listened. Because let's be honest, you can touch people in a lot of ways, but if you touch their money, you really see who they are.
Yeah, and that would have been for me a big compliment to the morning, is if I bumped into someone at the parking lot and I asked them, so what did you get out of this morning's teaching? And they said, selfishness is overcome by generosity.
Exactly.
Then I would have said, bang on, you hit it. Because that's, again, yeah, touch me anyway, don't touch my wallet.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's almost like people's hearts and wallets are connected. And you can kind of tell where people's hearts are at by how generous they're willing to be. Because a lot of people, I think, would want to be more generous, but they have their own, maybe sometimes physical or even psychological limits as to how they approach that subject. But in all honesty, like the more generous we are, the more we realize how loved we are and that we are taken care of already, so we can help other people.
Yeah, the scripture does say that where a man's heart is, there his treasure is. Where his treasure is, there his heart is. And so it's very important to understand where our money is going, and for us to have a self-analysis in that. Am I being too selfish in the resources that I've been given? And one of the other things that came out was we are stewards. We're stewards of our life. We're stewards of our family. We're stewards of our finances, which means that we are acting on behalf of another, and that the other is the Lord. He's given us all these things, and it came out a number of times during the chapters of 1 Corinthians that why are you boasting in what you've got? Because you've been given that. You can't boast in it. And even it says when you're born again, it's not a point of boasting. It's a matter of gratefully accepting. And
Yeah, so you ran out of steam and you ran out of a bit of time at the end. But what was it that you would have liked to have said about chapter 16 that you maybe felt you ran out of time on?
I think I did say what I wanted to say. I could have just elaborated a bit more at the end, because I had the clock against me, and I'd taken too much time earlier leading up to that point. So I did say everything I wanted to, but it is useful to repeat things. And so I'm glad I started with that giving, those verses on giving right in the beginning, and coming back to it. Just to expand that slightly more, another couple of minutes would have probably made a difference to give more emphasis to that.
So in another minute or two, what could you expand on chapter 16, verse 1, and the taking up of an offering?
It would definitely have been to the antidote to this selfishness that we've seen and this childishness is to give and take that part of your life very seriously. In that you want to have that part of you and that portion that you have given. It was interesting how Paul says to set out an offering according to your ability, and everyone has a different ability. So Jesus looked at the woman at with her 2 mites, and she gave a teaching around that. And Jesus had a lot to say about finance, and it's throughout the Bible that it is a very, very important part of our lives, as Mark was saying earlier. And just to take our giving and the way we deal with finance, take it very seriously, because it actually shows how we are. And if we have a look at how we deal with our finances, we can see in that our attitude towards generosity and the goodness of God. And we should maybe reassess ourselves and just make sure that we are being as generous as we can. And it's an attitude, it's not a quantity. The quantity is not important, as Jesus said about the widow, but it is our attitude towards that I want to always find every opportunity to give. Paul has expanded on that by saying that we would be blessed, that we can be a blessing, and in every opportunity, for us to be able to take every opportunity. How often we find ourselves in a situation where somebody is in need, and we say, I wish I had the money to put into that. But maybe we do. And maybe we're not prepared to be that generous, or maybe we're not prepared to allocate that, or maybe we don't trust God quite enough to be able to put into that offering. So looking at your money is a very, very good standard of where you're standing with the Lord.
Yeah, I would like to just ask you one question, and that is, when Paul was saying that, he was saying that he's going to come and collect it for Jerusalem. Why did Jerusalem need their gift? What was the reason behind Jerusalem?
I believe there was a famine.
Yeah.
And we know that the church was had been for a large period of time of persecution, and there was a lot of need there, and so and that was the home, if you like, the source of the faith that they were receiving from Paul. Paul was sent out by the church in Jerusalem, and it was like giving something back that you've received back to your home base, and being generous towards that need. Now, they would never have met the people from there except Paul and Timothy and maybe a few of the others that came out of that church. But it was important for them to give into that particular area. And it was a great opportunity to give into that particular field. I'm sure there were lots of other opportunities, there were lots of other needs, but Paul particularly wanted that to go back to the church for the opportunity there, and also going back to their roots.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point, that we, in our giving, is not only for our own consumption, but we give for the benefit of others. It's a really good point. And I think just while we're talking about finance and giving beyond our own immediate needs, people could listen to this and go, well, there you go, the church talking about money again. Yeah, there's the church talking about money. It's a subtle manipulation and underlying way to suck money out of. But the subject of giving is so central to the gospel that to take it out, you'd have to tear half the New Testament out, because the giving itself is not about the money and the giving, it's about the heart.
Correct.
And when you got to give to a cause beyond yourself, in their case to Jerusalem, in our case to the administration of a local eldership for the sake of the gospel, it takes a lot of faith. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, to entrust other people with my hard-earned, sweat-bought cash. So, yeah, good point. Another question I always ask regarding the Sunday preach is that the importance it has in bearing to Jesus Christ and the gospel. So I've said before that not every verse in the Bible is about Jesus, but every verse in the Bible will lead us to Christ, whether it's through poetry, through history, through wisdom, through the epistles, through revelations. There's always a thread that leads. So Steve, in your overview and your synopsis of Corinthians, what would be the big pointers? And Mark, you can also jump in to this one.
The main thing for me was the Father was so generous, he gave his only Son. And that is the standard of generosity that the head of the church is expecting of his body, in that if he gave the very best thing that he could for you to be saved out of this dark and lost world, what is too much for you to give? And if we put it in those terms, then there's if the Lord shows me a need, surely I should find every way that I can to pay into that and to give something into that. But it'll be according to our ability. And the most amazing thing is it was said in that first few verses of chapter 16, was it's according to our ability. And the amazing thing is the Lord gives us the right to decide what is enough, what is right. And he doesn't take our free will out of that, forcing us like in the law. We had to give, the Jews had to give 10%. You have to do that, otherwise you're cursed. In the New Testament, we are asked to be generous according to our ability and also the prosperity of our own soul. And so that puts the onus on us. Instead of being externally put upon us, then it's upon us. And the question is for us, am I being generous enough?
Just coming back to what the pointers are to Jesus and the gospel, Mark?
Yeah, I think it really shows us that Jesus, as an example, was super generous. He gave up everything to become the lowest, to give up even that so we could have all that he had. And I think there's nothing, I mean, we can attribute a monetary value to a whole bunch of things, but you really can't when it comes to the price Jesus paid. And I think he's outdone us on generosity. And if we carry his nature, that's what we really need to see. Looking back, that's what Paul was saying. Be generous even as God is generous.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for us to hear, because no matter what book of the Bible we're studying, no matter what chapter or what verse, it's not just about a suave, rhetorical speech, but it's about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that point of generosity is a great place to land. Taking up an offering this shows the very nature and heart of God.
And I'd like us all to ask ourselves out of this is, do I trust God for my finance? I think we can say very quickly and easily, yes, of course I do. But do we?
That's a great challenge. I think we need to take that and take it to heart, that God was the most generous person in the universe, and now he's given us a barometer in our giving to reciprocate on that giving. But chapter 16 isn't only about finances, although he starts off that way. He then goes into a lot of personal greetings which speak a lot about the community of the local church. And I think that is so beautiful. Go read it for yourself. Go and read how intimate he speaks and some of his own personal challenges he reflects. And chapter 16 is really a kind of a wrapping up in the local church around relationships, around people he wants to greet, people Timothy he's sending, and also his own struggles that he went through, and that with his own hands that were chained and had suffered under persecution, he wrote this epistle from Ephesus to the Corinthian church, yearning and longing to come and visit them as a community, as friends, as his family. So Steve and Mark, thanks for that. A little bit of a wrap-up for Sunday morning. And we're not finished with Corinthians, even though we did chapter 16. We kind of started in the middle of the book and we've worked through little haphazard, but we've been taking a section of thought at a time and expounding. This coming week, I'm going to be looking at chapter 1 and 2, and then it'll be followed by chapter 3 and 4, and then chapter 5, and we landed on 6 and 7. Then we've treated the whole book of Corinthians. God bless you. Thanks for listening to this. I hope some questions, some provoking has come, and thanks to you guys for your input. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.